Hello, this is Justin FM. Today I'm going to share with you what my goats taught me about marketing. You probably don't know this about me, but when I was a kid, we actually raised dairy goats, and I learned how to milk goats when I was 12 years old. And I'll tell you, the hardest part about goats is fencing them. If you fence cows, for instance, using electric fence, which is what we use electric fence, then you can set up an electric fence and the cow will go over, get shocked once or twice, and then won't go near that fence again. That's how cows work. And that's kind of common sense, how an animal would see it. They'd stay away from it. I know something interesting with goats though. When the electric fence would short out and shut off, which happened fairly often, long grass would grow up against it or whatever, and as soon as the electric fence went off, within a few minutes, all the goats would be out. And I couldn't really figure out how that was happening until I watched for a while and I noticed something really odd about their behavior. What the goats would do is they would get right up against the fence, they put their nose within an inch of the fence, and they would feel the static electricity. So they were actually checking the fence multiple times a day to see if it was still on, testing it with their nose. They weren't touching it, but they were getting real close to it so they could feel the electricity. And as soon as the electricity went off, they knew it and they all got out. The goats were testing constantly because they wanted the apples that were on the other side of the fence. To bring this back to business, the lesson here is we should be constantly testing, just like those goats who want to get at the apples. Not testing is one of the core mistakes that almost all small businesses make. I would go so far as to say that most of your marketing efforts need to be trackable. If you can't test the effectiveness of a specific marketing technique, then you'll never know with any kind of accuracy how well it works. So it's vitally important that you're able to test any given marketing technique that you're going to use. There are a few exceptions to this, like branding, and there are some marketing efforts that you're just not going to be able to test. However, common sense will lead you to understand that they are vitally important. It's vitally important to have a business card, but you won't necessarily know how many sales you would get without a business card. It's not worth trying it to test it. So there are pieces of this that you can't test, but when you're looking at new marketing pieces, new marketing techniques, then it's important to have that in there. And unless it's very low cost, very low risk, you want to only invest your extra money in stuff that is testable. The most basic test you can run is to just ask every person who contacts you, how did you hear about us? And this is something that you should be asking every single customer, or whoever is answering the phones needs to be asking every single customer. It's basically just the bare minimum question that you need to have answered. But there's one important part of this. You also need to document the answers. So a lot of times people will ask the question kind of reflexively, and they feel like they have a pretty good idea of how many people are calling from one thing or another, but they're not documenting it. So a month goes by and you say, okay, you got 20 phone calls. How many of those came from your website? And they say, oh, I think about half of them, or it didn't seem like very many of them, or whatever the answer is. The key element here is that if you recorded them, you'd be able to tell to the person how many people, and then also track those people down through the sales process. So not only how many of those people called you, but how many of those people actually took action and bought from you. And then how big were those sales? So that's all part of the tracking process. A little side note on this, a lot of times people will answer, I found you on Google. And that can mean a few different things. It could be 5 different places that they actually found you. They just started at Google. So it's a good idea to ask the question. If they say, I found you on Google, say, great, what did you search for? And that's true. I mean, if they say, I found you by asking Alexa or something, then you can say, what did you ask Alexa? So it's a good idea to do one follow-up question on there if it's not obvious. If it's not, Joe sent me your information, that's a referral from Joe, or I found you on this site where you advertise, or something like that, then it's a good idea to ask that follow-up question to go along with it. And train your people to, and document the question. Create a sheet and write them down, compile the numbers every week, and you'll be absolutely glad you did. Try that for 30 days. Tell me that it's not helpful. I'm sure it will be. We go a lot deeper into testing and tracking, and there's so many different things, especially with online marketing, that you can do as far as tracking and testing. But I just wanted to give you the basics here, just to say how important it was and get you into the habit of documenting where people are coming from and understanding how important it is for you to do that. So hopefully you find this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. Thank you for your time.